Hello, my name is Terri O'Sullivan and I'm a volunteer for Faith to Faithless, which is the apostate support programme for the national charity Humanist UK. Faith to Faithless was set up in 2015 to do two things. One was to raise awareness of the difficulties of leaving high control religion in the UK, and two, to support apostates who have left high control religious groups and cults. Faith to Faithless raises awareness of apostasy by doing the following. We hold lots of public lectures, panel discussion events and presentations, engaging with social outreach organisations, support services and universities across the country, as well as holding online conversations like this. And then our team of volunteers support apostates by doing the following. We also hold regular apostate socials up and down the country. These are informal meetups, usually held in a cafe on the weekend for a couple of hours. And we offer safeguarding training to frontline services to better help them understand the issues that apostates face. We hold facilitated peer support sessions in the UK's major cities as well. And if you want to learn more about these things, then do visit our website at www.faith2faithless.com. So today I'm going to be talking with John Viney, who is a former Jehovah's Witness. And it is quite well known in the ex-Jehovah's Witness community, actually, because of all the wonderful work he's been doing to support other ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, and hopefully be able to tell us a little bit about that. So thank you, John, for joining us. It's really great to have you on, and thank you for spending your time to tell us about your story. So yeah, if you, what I was going to say, John, is if you want to tell us a little bit about you, how you became a Jehovah's Witness, what that was like for you, and then if you want to then tell us what was it that triggered you to leave, what was your exit story like, what happened to you as a result, and then take us from there into how that triggered your activism work for you.
All right, thank you, Terri. First of all, I do want to say thank you so much to yourself and to Faith to Faithless, who I have followed quite closely over the last few years, doing a great job. I really appreciate it. It's a thrill and a privilege to be part of this. Oh. So anyway, I have to go back 68 years, because that's how old I am. And in 1952, when I was born, only 5 years later, my mum and dad became Jehovah's Witnesses. So from the age of 5, I was brought up in a closed-minded, what we now call cult, Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yes.
So I experienced everything that youngsters experience when you go to school. You weren't allowed to sit in prayers or assembly. You sat outside. That was always embarrassing. You didn't take part in any religious education in school. You weren't allowed to go to any sort of extracurricular activity outside of school hours. I was very keen, in fact, not very keen, I was mad on football, and wanted to play football for the school teams. Anything that was done outside school hours, you couldn't do. No. And I distinctly remember one day the school, because I did make the school team, but you could only play football if they were playing during the school hours, and they had a really big match on a Saturday morning. And a Saturday morning is, for Jehovah's Witnesses, a key preaching activity. And I remember asking my dad and using all of the boyish wiles I could to see if I could get to play, but it didn't work. I went door to door while my friends were kicking a football. I mean, I've made light of that, but that is the situation that youngsters are in. You don't celebrate Christmas, so you have nothing to do with the Christmas activities in school, birthday activity, Halloween, Mother's Day, Father's Day. I'm sure most of the people watching who are from the audience of Faith to Faithless know that Jehovah's Witnesses are quite an exclusive group. Yeah. And so for a youngster, I was shown a great deal of love by my mum and dad. So I had a lovely upbringing, and I wouldn't want to detract from that. It was a fantastic upbringing. And I was brought up in the faith, so I gave talks as a boy at the Kingdom Hall, which is the churches that they use. So even as a little boy, they would put you on the platform in front of maybe 100 people, and you'd read the Bible verses. And as I got older and went through school, academia is not something that is encouraged by Jehovah's Witnesses. In fact, a career is not something that's encouraged. So I had some aspirations, but quickly they were dispersed because I didn't want a career in this old world that is soon to be destroyed. And that's how we looked at the future. So at 15, which was the last year that I went to school and could leave at 15. It was the last year that legally you could leave at 15 without taking any sort of exam. In 1967, that was. And I got baptized, I think, 2 weeks later as a Jehovah's Witness on July the 23rd, 1967, and at Peterborough Football Ground.
Wow.
And and then straight away, I became what's known as a pioneer, which is a full-time preacher. And that was, in those days, you agreed to do 100 hours a month preaching, or 1,200 hours a year.
Oh, you were full-time, 100 hours. When I was doing it, it was only 90 hours. They knocked it down every so often, didn't they?
That's right. They knocked it down, I think. Yeah, I was one of the hard nuts. And you had a yearly quota of 1,200. So if you did 80 one month, you had to submit a reason why you didn't do 100, but then you had to make that 20 up anyway another month. So by the end of the year, you did 1,200. There was no time off for holidays or anything like that. So my whole life was preaching, going to the Kingdom Hall, and doing everything associated with Jehovah's Witnesses. And I was, even though I say so myself, I was a good Jehovah's Witness. I thoroughly believed it and volunteered in every aspect of it, whichever way it could be done, whether it was cleaning the Kingdom Hall, building work, pre-assembly work, where the assemblies are where lots of Jehovah's Witness congregations gather together for a 2, 3, 4 or 5 day assembly. Well, you would go up weeks beforehand to prepare the grounds. You even put in toilets. I remember going to Twickenham, digging grounds up for toilets. The whole thing was like a really interesting project, actually. So I threw myself into this whole religious thing. And when I was 17 and a half, I moved down to Wales to pioneer, to be the full-time member down here.
Yeah.
And then about a year and a half later, I had the highlight of my life. I met my wife. And so that was one good thing of moving down to Wales. I met Mary at one of the assemblies in Barry in South Wales. So Mary and I got married. She was a pioneer as well, so we pioneered together. We lived in one of the valleys that was very, very, in fact, the next village to Aberfan, where that terrible disaster was in 1960s. And eventually moved to Barry, and my wife then became pregnant with our daughter Karen, and that's when I actually stopped doing full-time preaching, but I maintained my career as a window cleaner, and that's what was started when I was about 14. Wow. I was assigned as a ministerial servant quite early on, and a ministerial servant is similar to what you would call a deacon in the church. So I was doing jobs around the Kingdom Hall and all of the other activities that, as in a support role. And then I moved to, I think I said I moved to Barry, and eventually when I was about 29, I believe, I became an elder, was appointed as an elder in the faith. And I served as an elder for about 25 odd years. And because I threw myself into it, I did give talks. I did do teaching assignments. So I was assigned things like talking to large groups at assemblies. In fact, the biggest audience I spoke to was 10,000 at the Cardiff Arms Park. Then around 1990, I had a letter through from the Watchtower Society asking if I would be the chairman of the Hospital Liaison Committee for the whole of Wales at that time. So for the next 15 years, with another group of men, elders, we went round talking to doctors. We made appointments for doctors.
Do you want to explain to people what a Hospital Liaison Committee is, for those that don't know the Jehovah's Witnesses?
Yes, well, one of the things that Jehovah's Witnesses are known for is their refusal of blood transfusions, and sometimes blood products. Yeah. So they took the initiative in the 1990s to try and find out, what can you do as an alternative? Is it just a case of if you refuse blood, you die? Are those the only two choices? And so they set out on this campaign of training men such as myself to go and visit doctors, particularly doctors who had had experience at not using blood, but being successful. And then by accumulating medical articles and making friends with these doctors, we would build up a bank of doctors that would be willing to treat Jehovah's Witnesses without the use of blood. And as that increased, we attended seminars. We gave talks at seminars. We would go and talk to groups of doctors. And again, I had some great experiences of even attending international conferences, meeting some of the world's greatest doctors that were running non-blood medical management centers. Wow. So that was done, and I was sort of at the peak of that, if you like, in around 2002. As an elder and as a Jehovah's Witness.
Wales then for that?
Sorry?
Were you covering just people in the area of Wales, or?
When I was appointed, I covered all of Wales.
Yeah.
After about 10 years, they appointed another committee in Swansea, and then I think the Liverpool committee covered North Wales. But for many years, I would just drive around the whole of Wales with one of the other brothers, one of the other members, visiting doctors. And
so the majority of your time in that is visiting doctors. I thought a lot of it was visiting Jehovah's Witnesses who needed operations that would likely need to have blood. So most of your time was spent talking with doctors then, trying to get them on side, sort of thing, or?
You got it. Yeah, it was a dual role. We attended hospitals. If there was a need to assist and help and support a Jehovah's Witness who was in hospital, we did that. But in the meantime, the idea was to find doctors that were willing to work with Jehovah's Witnesses and maybe use alternative procedures. So it was a dual role, really. And I have to say, it was one that I enjoyed. It got me into places I would never, as a window cleaner.
Yeah.
I used to actually be amazed that I would be talking to a group of anaesthetists, heart surgeons, often the best in the country.
Yeah.
And yet in the morning I'd been cleaning windows. So
comical when you think about it, but also at the same side of thing, no insult to you, but for the Jehovah's Witnesses, for the individuals, their lives were on the line.
Yeah.
And there's somebody without a medical degree off to
yeah. Well,
Just their fates with doctors.
to be fair, we were told, and we pretended to be doctors. The way we dealt with it was, look, we're here to ask for your help. We weren't there to tell them what to do.
Wow.
To be fair, that was our attitude. You are the experts. We need you. Jehovah's Witnesses need you. That's why we're here.
Okay.
But these, and then in our presentation, we would say, these are some of the medical articles that some of your colleagues have written of how they've done things without blood. Would you mind looking at these to see if there was some way in which, in this hospital, you could adopt some of these procedures if you have a Jehovah's Witness? So the whole idea was a softly making friends, not demanding. I mean, that was our approach anyway, or that was my approach. How others did it, I don't know. But we were encouraged to be kind and to say that they're the experts, and they were. And you know what? We had some fantastic experiences with doctors. They really were welcoming to us. And to this day, I've got people that I'm friends with that I met when I went to speak to them as a Jehovah's Witness. Under those circumstances. And most of the doctors we spoke to are there because they love people. They want to do the right thing. So they were accommodating. So that was a great privilege for me. So that was where I reached, if you like, as a pinnacle as a Jehovah's Witness. I was giving talks at assemblies. I was going around congregation to congregation, talking to them on a Saturday evening about being on the hospital liaison committee and what Jehovah's Witnesses could do. We told them what the doctors were doing. What can Jehovah's Witnesses do to prepare themselves? So I did get, I suppose I was what they would call a prominent person within the organization. But what had happened 20 years previously was always in the background, and that is that my daughter, at the age of about 12 or 13, had been abused by an elder in the congregation who was a relative, and in trying to get that situation sorted out, it caused a great deal of hurt, and I wouldn't let that situation stop me being a Jehovah's Witness in those days. I thought, well, as Christians, we've got to get over it. We've got to forgive. You have to try and help my daughter, but maybe, or even the individual that's doing it. It's a sort of a twisted way of thinking, which is why I now know in my work now of trying to expose child abuse within Jehovah's Witnesses, I still know that we have to be kind to the Jehovah's Witnesses victims, survivors, and family, because they're trapped in it. I was there, so I know how they are feeling. They will even defend their religion rather than get the religion into trouble over child abuse.
What happened with your family? Did you speak with the police? Were you discouraged from, or was there just no question that the police would be involved? Or
well, because I think with my daughter's situation, and we're going back 25 years now, I think her situation was one of the first that we'd ever dealt with. And I think even for Jehovah's Witnesses in this country, I don't know what had been done previous to that. We wrote to the Bethel, which is the headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses, and they wrote a letter back basically saying, look, you've got to decide what you want to do. They were more interested in dealing with the individual that had committed the problem. As it happened, my wife and myself and my daughter did go to the police, but in actual fact I am missing a little chunk out here, because what actually happened was, when my daughter was about 12 or 13 and when this happened, I didn't fully appreciate that she was being abused. In fact, what she actually said to me was she didn't like the way that this particular individual was kissing her. Those were her words to me. And I interpreted that to mean, oh, he's very affectionate. So I actually went to see him to say, do you mind not being so affectionate with my daughter?
Oh.
It was way over my head. I hadn't appreciated. So it wasn't that I ignored the abuse. I just didn't know it was abuse.
Yeah.
And it was only when my daughter became about 16, 15 or 16, that she started cutting her wrists with razor blades, obviously as a cry for help. And to cut a long story short, one of the other friends in our family, who was an elder, who's incidentally also now not a Jehovah's Witness, he encouraged her to write down the whole experience. Then we saw written down at age 16 what had been going on, and it was at that point that we went to the police. The police arrested the person, interviewed him. He gave what's called a no comment interview. And eventually the police said, look, we believe your daughter, but I'm afraid it's her word against his. We don't think we would get anywhere in court. So the matter wasn't taken up.
Oh my goodness. Right.
Yeah.
They didn't take things as seriously back then as they perhaps would today. I think like
so.
that would have gone straight to court today.
Right.
I would hope so.
Yeah. And in those days as well, you couldn't inform a jury that the person said no comment. I think today, if someone gives a no comment interview and says, sorry, no comment, obviously, if you say that to a jury, that's a big question mark over the individual, I think. Yeah. You couldn't do that in those days. So my daughter, on her path or on her roadway out, she decided to leave the religion. She got a boyfriend who was not a Jehovah's Witness. That caused problems, and eventually she became what's known as a disfellowshipped person. So she was completely...
What was she disfellowshipped for?
She had a boyfriend who was not a Jehovah's Witness.
Right.
And obviously that their lifestyle, including, I'm guessing, sexual relations outside of marriage, that type of thing, she got disfellowshipped. So my wife and I were in a really difficult situation because we had a daughter that was emotionally distraught and needing help, but I was an elder, and a prominent elder, that had to put on a good face and carry the flag for Watchtower's organisation, and I had to shun my daughter.
Oh God, how old was she at this point?
She was 16, I think maybe 17 eventually then.
So it's only a year or two later that you'd found all this out, that this happened.
Yes. So for about 10 years, I was a Jehovah's Witness carrying out all of these other responsibilities, but I was also trying to support my daughter, who I knew had gone through a most horrific event. And not only that, but my middle daughter, although she hadn't been abused, she'd received some bad treatment as well. So she also left the organisation at 16 and was also disfellowshipped. So now I had two of my daughters that I had to shun, both emotionally not right. And so I was helping them. If I was seen helping them, I would get a visit from elders saying, we need to speak to you. You've been seen talking to your daughters. And so I would be hauled over the coals and told off. And I would have to tell the elders, look, I've needed to speak to them because of this, because of that. And they would say, oh, okay, we understand. And then 6 months later, we're back again with elders coming to see me.
You risked being disfellowshipped yourself, didn't you? By talking to them and continuing to support your daughters.
That is a possible outcome eventually. Yeah. You have to be seen to be upholding the organizational decision,
yeah,
and cutting off. And as many in faithless may know, that cutting off literally means absolutely cutting off. So that had a profound effect on my mental health and emotional health. But nevertheless, I carried on and was performing all of my functions as an elder. My daughter had she had children. She had 2 children, and my other daughter also was having children. So we had to treat them all at arm's length. But I suppose I was continually in those days under a great deal of pressure. I've just felt under a great deal of pressure. And I remember my daughter one day coming to me, this is about 15 years ago, and saying, I'm going to get married. Would you walk me down the aisle? Now, under normal circumstances, any dad is going to go, wow, what a fantastic privilege.
Yeah, yeah.
All I saw in my head was, oh my goodness, this is going to go bad. This is going to go wrong.
Yeah.
But I thought about it, and I thought, do you know what? This girl's had so many bad experiences in her life. I'm not going to say no to this. Yeah. I did try and do this, if you like, secretly. I didn't make a big song and dance about it. So on the Saturday, I walked my daughter down the aisle. That was on the Saturday afternoon. 3 days later, on the Tuesday evening, yeah, I was approached by our presiding elder. Would I go to the back room? They needed to see me. Wow. Anyway, someone had ratted on me, and I was in big trouble.
Yeah.
And after that, I had several meetings with elders who they were trying to stop me from seeing my daughters, and I was trying to explain to them that there are other issues going on in their lives, and I was just being pulled like an elastic band, being pulled and pulled and pulled. And it got, I won't go, well, there's so many things happened. I just can't even go into all of it. There were some bad things going on in the congregation. There were about 16 or 17 elders. Some of their own children were getting up to the most terrible things, but they were turning a blind eye to it. I was an elder that reported my daughters. When my daughters did things wrong, I went and said, oh, that you should know they're doing this and doing that, because I thought everyone did that. But
it's a sign of a cult, isn't it? That
my goodness,
you could just tell on your own family and friends and just report them to the authority.
Yeah. Well, I was, as I say, a good Jehovah's Witness, and you're supposed to report on yourself.
Yeah.
To a degree, I did. But I found out things going on in the congregation. While I was trying to deal with all my issues, I found out other things in the congregation that other elders were covering over the sins, if you like, of their children. And so I took a stand and brought something out into the light. Well, I was not popular. And I was sort of castigated, and so I was seen as a problem. Yeah. So not only did I have my own issues with my daughters I was dealing with, I was also trying to deal with other things in the congregation that were going on that other elders were being hypocritical about. And that led to some very high-powered meetings, of which some of the elders got into trouble. And because they got into trouble, they were taking it out on me. Yeah. So it culminated in I remember Mary and I going on holiday to America, and before we went, one of the elders said, we're having a meeting with you, go on holiday, when you come back we're going to have a meeting. So we did that. I went into this Jehovah's Witnesses house, where the presiding overseer, that was the chairman of the body of elders, and the circuit overseer, who was an important man. He's a traveling overseer. Those two, they sat down on a settee, and I sat down on a chair. And I remember them, I'll never forget this meeting. They were trying to encourage me to give up my daughters so I could stay an elder and a good Jehovah's Witness. In fact, one of them actually said, look, give up your daughters and stay an elder. you're so needed. And at that point, I had a bizarre emotional experience, which might just give you an idea, or yeah, it would give you an idea of my emotional state. I had one of these out-of-body experiences where I was in the room. I saw the two elders there and me, but I was up in the corner of the room looking down on the three of us.
Yeah, yeah.
Very weird. I'll never forget it. I now know it's extreme stress. It's not mental illness, but it could have led to me having a mental breakdown. I remember seeing the three of us sat in this room where they're encouraging me to give up my daughters. And I suddenly just clicked. Something went bang in my head. It was like a physical bang. And I sort of realized, what am I doing? What am I doing? I just politely turned to them and said, I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. I shook their hands, walked out of the house, and I remember jumping up in the air and punching the air with my fist. And it was like a relief. It was like a pressure cooker that's been let loose, and all the pressure just went. And I just knew I would never, ever want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore. So I went from being a very, very, very active, high-ranking Jehovah's Witness. I had never had any problems with doctrine. I hadn't read any apostate material. I hadn't had any doubts of beliefs. It was just purely the way I was treated. I just knew there was something very, very wrong with this religion, and that's what led. That's what my exit was. That it was nothing to do with a belief system, unless, of course, you count being shunned as the belief system. And from that day, I went home and I was worried. I thought, what's my wife going to say? Because my wife Mary was also a very staunch and faithful Jehovah's Witness. And you can tell that because she stayed a Jehovah's Witness for another 10 years after me.
Long time, wasn't it?
So she completely understood. She completely understood. I think she knew I was about maybe to have a breakdown. I don't know. So she supported me and I supported her. So ever since then, I used to drive her to the Kingdom Hall. I would take her to Jehovah's Witness meetings. I would take her to assemblies, but I wouldn't stay. And then eventually, my wife and other members of my family also had awakenings. So what I didn't do was ever say to my wife, you want to leave that religion, or that's there are a lot of. I allowed her to come to her own decision. My sister Alison also, when I first left, she, I think, was well, she wasn't very complimentary about me at the start, and then eventually her family had difficulties, and her children left, and then eventually my sister Alison left, and then she saw through it all as well. So most of my family, in fact, every person of my family is now out. Everybody I love is out. The only people who are in is the abuser and his family. They're still Jehovah's Witnesses.
So, oh my goodness. So is he still attending meetings?
Well, I purposely haven't. Well, he's in prison. Sorry, I mean, I missed that out. We had a 3-week court case where it was discovered that he had abused others. In fact, it seems as if I've been a catalyst for a lot of this, because I missed out a lot of the story. I missed out was that one of the things that I had to try and deal with all those years ago was the accusation of a sister being raped by one of our elders.
Right, yeah.
And it was the same elder that actually had abused my daughter. So we had to go through all that, dealing with how do you try to help a lady that's been raped. I was also on the I was also on duty at the back of the Kingdom Hall. So we, during a meeting, one or two of the men who were elders would sit at the back and would act as attendants. And I was on duty once when a lady who was not a Jehovah's Witness came in, very annoyed, crying. We took her into one of the back rooms to say, you know, what's the trouble? And she made an accusation about this guy as well.
Right.
So so we knew there was a problem. Well, eventually those four people, my daughter, another family member, the rape victim, and this lady who's nothing to do with Jehovah's Witnesses, they formed the basis of the court case against the abuser. And so he was sentenced to 14 years in prison. So what's interesting is that for the first, I don't know, 2, 3 or 4 years of his sentence, what we do know is that Jehovah's Witnesses went to visit him. Yeah. Wherever he was in prison, he was visited. And also, if he went round preaching in the prison, or if he was preaching or giving a witness, we call it, all he would do is write down how many hours he spent doing that, and he would give that figure to the brothers that came to visit him, and that would be added to the congregation total of preaching work.
Yes, so you still counting him as a brother in the congregation.
Yeah, now I understand now that he is disfellowshipped. That's my understanding now.
Right, okay.
But even that is interesting, Terry, because you will know that someone who is disfellowshipped, it's preceded by an announcement at the Kingdom Hall that, you know, it would be this is to announce that John Viney is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses, or something like that. No announcement was ever made about this guy, no announcement, so that when we rang his local congregation to say, we're just checking up, we've heard that this has happened, the presiding overseer and the elders in that congregation didn't know he'd been disfellowshipped. So the congregation
didn't know.
No.
So who disfellowshipped him then?
Well, there's a good question for you to ask the Watchtower Society. The elders in the congregation did not disfellowship him and didn't know he was disfellowshipped. We think that Watchtower, because my case, or this case, has been referred to a lot in the press and we've been using it, we think they stepped in and distanced themselves and disfellowshipped him, but so didn't go through the right channels.
Right. So wouldn't the elders have figured out, because they'd have had to have told them to stop visiting him, wouldn't they? Or had they just stopped anyway? Or
well, no, because his local congregation is near me.
Ah.
The prison where he was serving is somewhere else in the country.
Ah.
So the visits he was getting from elders were from another congregation somewhere else in the country.
Right.
But the congregation he was a part of when he was convicted, and where all his family are,
yeah,
they had no knowledge. It was not announced at all. So Watchtower do make up their own rules.
Well, yeah, because that breaks their own rules, doesn't it? Because the point that they say for disfellowshipping somebody is that public announcement at the Kingdom Hall of the church, because it's cleaning the congregation. That's their own language, cleaning the congregation. So to make that announcement is to clean the congregation. So to have not done it, it's exactly to be about covering them up in the press.
I think, yeah, I think that is that the conclusion that you've drawn, I think is absolutely the correct one. But because I mean, it's not something I'm really interested in. It is something I think needs investigating, but something I've discovered since I've left, and perhaps we can come on to the sort of a slightly different chapter now in my life. Once I left, I hadn't left because of doctrinal issues or because of reading apostate literature or associating with bad people. I left because I was treated really badly, and I could see with my own eyes that there was something very, very wrong with what was going on. Then it was only then that I started to investigate, well, if that's wrong, is there anything else? Is there anything else wrong? And then once you start doing that, wow. The analogy I use is the film The Wizard of Oz. I don't want to spoil the film for anyone who hasn't seen it, but there's a spoiler coming, and that right at the end of The Wizard of Oz, you've got the Tin Man and the Scarecrow and Dorothy and the Lion going to see the wizard, because the wizard is going to put it all right, although they're and then what happens is the dog Toto nips round the back, pulls a curtain open, and all you see is some guy working machinery.
Yeah.
Well, what actually happened to me was I pulled the curtain back and just stood in amazement at all the things I thought this was God's organization.
Yeah.
And God was spirit directing the governing body, and God's spirit was directing the writing of the Watchtower magazine. And you suddenly have that curtain pulled back, and you suddenly realize, my goodness, this is what I've been believing all these years, and this is what I made my kids believe, and this is what I went around preaching for 50 years, because I was a Jehovah's for 50 years. Yeah. So since my leaving, I took a decision that I felt I needed to help to expose some of the principles or beliefs that Jehovah's Witnesses are preaching. What I have not done, and what I won't do, is attack individual people, because I've been there and I know what it's like. You're in that faith, and I don't want to ruin someone's faith either. I'm not interested in trying to diminish someone's faith. I am, well, it was described recently, I had to go to London in January to take part in a court case. It's a public court case, so this is nothing litigious. It was a court case where the rape victim that I spoke about earlier, and in court parlance, she was known as BXB. The court case was BXB versus Watchtower.
Right.
And this lady was taking Watchtower to court for compensation because she'd been raped by one of their elders. That's the court case. Wow. And the judgment was given that, yes, Watchtower were vicariously liable. So she was awarded £62,000. When I gave evidence at that court, because I was the elder that she approached all those years ago to talk about it, so I was involved in the case. When I was first got on the stand, the Watchtower's barrister said, "Mr. Viney, you're a you're a campaigner against Jehovah's Witnesses, aren't you?" That was her opening statement, and I took great pains to say, actually, no, that couldn't be further from the truth. I'm not a campaigner against Jehovah's Witnesses. I am a campaigner against child abuse.
Yeah.
And if that child abuse takes place within Jehovah's Witnesses, then I am a campaigner against it. But I'm not a campaigner against Jehovah's Witnesses. I have friends who are Jehovah's Witnesses. I still know people in the Bethel who are Jehovah's Witnesses. So I don't want to campaign against them or their faith, but I will be outspoken about things like shunning children, shunning youths, or child abuse. I feel that they're two things that are worth campaigning against. So since my demise as a Jehovah's Witness, I have looked for opportunities to highlight where shunning, or more importantly, actually, child abuse is still going on amongst Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah. It's amazing, really. I mean, that's the perfect response, really, John. What you said. It's not the individuals, the Jehovah's Witnesses themselves, each individual Jehovah's Witness. We ourselves were Jehovah's Witnesses. It's those just awful practices that are just against humanity anyway, just child abuse, and even they themselves can't say that that's acceptable. What they do is just deny that it's happening.
Yeah, I did something for me which was quite I still look back and think I don't know how I did it. 2 years ago, in one of the Watchtower magazines that they produced, they came as close as I'd ever seen them to admitting that within Jehovah's Witnesses there may be child abusers. The actual line in their Watchtower said, "Some who profess to be Jehovah's Witnesses."
So they're trying to say that they're not, if they're a child abuser, they're not a Jehovah's Witness anyway.
Right. And that so incensed me. I thought, what do they mean? The elder that abused my daughter had been a Jehovah's Witness 30-something years. He wasn't just professed. Most of the other people that are convicted in court that we hear about that have been ministerial servants or elders, they're not professed Jehovah's Witnesses. They were Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah. By the fact that they've got those titles of authority within the organisation, they can't deny, it's undeniable that they are Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah.
What I did following that magazine, in fact, it was only like 4 or 5 days later, the Jehovah's Witnesses in Cardiff had a big convention. And as I say, I did something that I didn't think I would ever do. And that is I managed to, I had a movie camera, and I got a friend of mine who worked in a media setting, and asked if he would mind filming and recording me approaching Jehovah's Witnesses in Cardiff. So you can see this on YouTube. I think it says something like "Father confronts Jehovah's Witnesses," and I very respectfully went over to the members of the Jehovah, all outside the assembly, and as soon as they saw me coming, everyone was running.
Running away. Oh no, it's an evil apostate.
In my hand, I had the Watchtower, and I just showed individuals. Can I just stop you a moment? I just wondered, can you tell me what the difference is between a Jehovah's Witness and a professed Jehovah's Witness? That was my question to everyone. That's all I was doing.
Right.
And of course,
interesting. I didn't know about this.
Yeah, well, you can see it on YouTube if you want. If you want to, it was amazing. I went to the attendants, the people that were monitoring the crowd. They wouldn't speak, and I said, "Look, surely if anyone needs to know the difference, who are you letting in today? You don't want to be letting in professed Jehovah's Witnesses, only Jehovah's Witnesses. So what's the difference?"
Yeah.
Obviously, it was a tongue-in-cheek thing, but it had the response. I think it's. I look back on it now and think, my goodness, I don't know how I had the courage to do that. But one thing we should mention, and that is this year in August, on August the 10th. I don't know when this is going out for your Faith to Faithless audience, but the government have set up what's called the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse, which we just use the acronym ICSA.
Yeah.
Well, ICSA will be examining and questioning Jehovah's Witnesses on August the 10th.
Right. Okay.
Because so many ex-Jehovah's Witnesses have written in and complained that they were abuse victims. So many ex-Jehovah's Witnesses and abuse victims have written into the Charity Commission that to say that they don't have a problem is an absolute lie. And so ICSA are only one day are questioning spokesmen from Jehovah's Witnesses, and several of us have been accepted as what they call core participants that can raise questions and be part of the proceedings. So it will be interesting to see what how Jehovah's Witnesses answer the accusation that their policies are deficient when it comes to child protection. They claim that they don't have a problem. That's their up-to-date claim, is they don't have a problem with child abuse, and that their policies are quite sufficient. We know different.
No.
And until something changes, we're still going to get people abused.
Do they still have the 2-witness rule, John?
Yes, they do. Yeah. Very much so.
You want to explain the 2-witness rule for those that don't know?
Yeah, well, that actually came to the fore in my daughter's case, because all those years ago, the same man that abused my daughter, as I said, only a month later or so, the accusation came forth that he had raped a lady. So we thought that meant, well, you've got 2 individuals making claims against this one man. Surely that's enough for Jehovah's Witnesses to investigate it. They said no, because one was a child and one was an adult. So they didn't even accept that they had 2 witnesses in that case. But to answer your question,
because the child doesn't count as a witness, is that?
Well, when we talk child, I mean, don't forget my daughter was about 16. But yes, that's what the conclusion they came to at the time was, one was a child or a minor and one was an adult. So they didn't class that as 2 witnesses against one individual, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, Jehovah's Witnesses have this belief that they say is based on Old Testament law, that in order to convict someone, you need 2 witnesses. And if you don't have 2 witnesses, you can't convict. So a Jehovah's Witness that rapes, or a Jehovah's Witness that abuses a child, if there is no one else to witness that or to back that up, they cannot take judicial action against them. So they cannot act within the faith. And the problem,
no conviction, because rapists generally don't wait till there's somebody watching.
No. So there's another belief of Jehovah's Witnesses that's steeped in biblical. Yes, it is biblical in its heritage, but one would have to say, in this day and age, would you be running a faith organization that needs 2 witnesses before they can act on something as serious as child abuse?
No, it's crazy, isn't it? They have something similar in Islam, but they need 4 witnesses. I think it works in a very similar way, but I don't know if they use it as seriously as the Jehovah's Witnesses do in the UK. So making this kind of decision based on writings from 2,000, 4,000 years ago is just, it's just crazy, isn't it? And just so immoral, really.
I could just mention, Terri, that just recently there have been quite interesting landmark cases that have highlighted the problems within Jehovah's Witnesses, so that now they are irrefutable. One that you will know, and I think some of your viewers may know, and that's called the Australian Royal Commission.
Yeah.
So that 4 years ago, the Australian government set up a commission to investigate Jehovah's Witnesses, and boy, didn't they do a good job. And it was discovered because they subpoenaed the figures from Jehovah's Witnesses. They discovered that over a period of many years, 1,006 Jehovah's Witnesses had been guilty of child abuse. 1,006. And the victims were over 1,800. But what was of note was that of those 1,006, none had been reported to the police. That was highlighted in the Australian Royal Commission. So that very recently in Switzerland, and I can send you this if you haven't seen it yet, in Switzerland there was a libel case because Jehovah's Witnesses are getting more litigious, as you have commented. They seem to be attacking anyone that says anything about them, whether it's true or not. And a cult expert in Switzerland did an interview where they gave several facts about Jehovah's Witnesses that were true, but Jehovah's Witnesses thought were libelous. So Jehovah's Witnesses took this person to court. The court agreed that the person's statements were probably libelous in that they said bad things, but the court decision was that since the things that they said were true, they were not libelous, and so Jehovah's Witnesses lost the case. And there's now a media release from this organization of all of the terrible things that Jehovah's Witnesses are guilty of, that now the court have agreed were true. Wow. So more and more people are becoming aware that there is a danger within the faith of Jehovah's Witnesses. So again, perhaps just to recap, we're not saying that all Jehovah's Witnesses are bad. We're not saying all Jehovah's Witnesses are child abusers. But because of the stance that they take, the faith is a dangerous one because they don't handle these situations in the right way. And therefore, youngsters or vulnerable people are just that, very vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I want to thank you, John, for not just speaking to us today, but for all the work that you've done over the last few years in bringing these cases to light, bringing them to the work you've done with the Charity Commission, the work you've done with ICSA, and the various court cases you've been involved in. And not just that, because a lot of ex-Jehovah's, former Jehovah's Witnesses watching this will know about all of that work. But what a lot of people won't know is in the background, you're also doing a lot of support work as well. And I want to thank you for that, because I know that you give a lot of emotional support. You're on the phone and you know, chatting online with people who've perhaps been victims of abuse or have gone through shunning and have had difficulties as a result of that. And you've done a lot of work through that, you and various other members of your family as well. So I just want to thank you on behalf of the ex-Jehovah's Witness community, really, for all the work you've done. It's absolutely amazing, and I don't know where we would be as a community without you, really. So thank you so much, really.
Okay. Well, as I said earlier, it's a great thrill to be part of it, and hopefully when COVID is gone and Faith to Faithless are holding real meetings again, I shall look forward to coming and being in the audience.
Oh, well, you'd always be very, very welcome, John, definitely. And just thank you for coming to talk to us today and spending time with us and tell us about your experience and what you've been doing, and your exit story as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
All right, so that brings us to a close. Thank you again, John, for joining us. We hope that people have found this conversation interesting. So to learn more about our work supporting apostates in the UK, please find us on our various social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Just search for Faith to Faithless. Or you can go to our website, which is faithtofaithless.com. If you would like to make a small donation to enable us to continue creating and sharing content like this, please click the donation link below. And thank you for watching us. Thank you, John, again, for all your hard work. And that's really great. So thank you.